And we are up and running. It is August 2nd. This year is evaporating at a remarkably fast pace. And I am having a morning chat with Barret about A Course in Miracles, and more specifically, we're looking at Workbook Lesson 121 today. How are you this morning, Barret?
I'm doing all right, it's always an opportunity to kind of come into the moment and to sort of be aware of what's happening and sort of take a little bit of check in on the inner landscape. So I've been doing all that today, and yeah, it's an interesting mix of parts that are feeling flowing and smooth, and then some parts that feel a little bumpy. And so just watching all that unfold and doing my best to forgive, as we're going to be talking about today with this workbook lesson.
Yeah, and one of the things that you can do is pick up a set of watercolors or a set of oil paints and a few brushes and canvas, and you can paint your inner landscape. That would be kind of fun to see what you came up with as far as trying to illustrate all the peaks and valleys in that terrain that exists within.
Yeah, it's true. I do like to do a bit of artwork, and most of my stuff ends up being fairly abstract, but it's a good feeling. It's a good way to kind of move through that, as you said, and reveal some of these parts that, it's not always easy to put words to everything we're feeling, but sometimes artistry or music is the other thing that I find is really nice in that category to experience and to allow the feelings to unfold.
Absolutely. And there are a lot of therapists now who work with art therapy, and I think that might be the possibility exists of that being a venue for A Course in Miracles experience. So we'll have to ponder that and put together some sort of a show and tell paint experience or musical experience with the course, and allow people to participate. That could be kind of fun.
Yeah, I like that idea. I'm always open to sort of, cross training, so to speak, so as we do our healing work.
Exactly. So we'll have to have a private discussion about this at a later point here. Start building a paradigm to spring on our unsuspecting followers.
Well, we've tipped our hat a little bit, but we'll see what comes out of it.
Exactly. So you're working on forgiveness. I'm working on forgiveness, and anybody who's actually committed to the course recognizes that that's the first level of reconciliation with our divine self, with our truth in God. So over the past few years, you've been doing a lot of coursework. How are you finding it as far as your capacity to forgive and to identify actually when you're going off the rails, so that you can draw yourself back and not have to enter into that forgiveness process?
Yeah, I would say it's just an ongoing journey. I use the metaphors of our healing journey as peeling back layer after layer with a lot of people, clients of mine, and I feel that in my own path too, that I make headway and I feel really open and inspired, and then I have kind of another wave of challenge and struggle, and it's like, okay, well, I just kind of move back and forth. But I sort of simultaneously have been noticing that there's a real gentleness that feels like it's been present even in some of my times where I feel a little more stuck in my life. There's this real non-judgmental, kind and sweet feeling that sort of is there underneath even the challenge. And I think the message is that really everything's going to be okay. There's always this feeling that's been getting stronger and stronger in me as I go forward, that no matter what is unfolding in the level of the world, it's all going to work out. It's all going to be okay. I'm going to do whatever I need to on my healing journey, and life will continue to unfold as it needs to. So there's a certain sense of, I guess, inner stability that's deeper than I think it used to be. And it's a very subtle but deep sense of comforting and reassurance that I have too. So those are a few of the pieces that I can really say are very different in my life, or at least much deeper than they were in the past. And I really do contribute all of that to my work with the Course and the practice of forgiveness.
Exactly. I definitely am paralleling you along with that. You know, the scary thing is, you know, every time you get in a car and enter into the fray of Chicago traffic, you have multiple opportunities to have that ego become inflamed, and you're swearing at other drivers that are cutting you off. And, you know, it's interesting how the sorest spots, I'm noticing that there is a relief in that direction too. I may not catch myself before the event, but I immediately am aware of it. And, you know, that's the whole journey, is to be able to identify it and release it. So, so we're starting off with some good thoughts in this lesson today. It says, here's the answer to your search for peace. Here is a key to meaning in a world that seems to make no sense. Here is a way to safety in apparent dangers that appear to threaten you at every turn and bring uncertainty to all your hopes of ever finding quietness and peace. Here are all the questions answered. Here the end of all uncertainty ensured at last. And that really is, you know, ground zero. That's the foundation that we are starting to build our new sense of identity on.
It's true, yeah. And it comes right back, right? So the title of the lesson is Forgiveness is the Key to Happiness. So this is the answer, right? This is the key. This is the, over and over again, he keeps pointing back to this. A lot of people, as they're studying the Course, still feel a little foggy or challenged around the idea of forgiveness. So I think it can be helpful to talk about what that is, because the Course is a very particular idea about what forgiveness means that is not exactly what the world's idea of forgiveness is. I think that both the world's idea of forgiveness and the Course have a few things in common, such as that forgiveness has something to do with kindness, something with letting go of old grievances. But the Course just goes so much deeper with it, and you know, we're going to focus a little bit on what those steps are. How do we use these ideas in our life, and how do we actually find that peace that Jesus is telling us is the result of forgiveness? So I like to say that there's a few major components of forgiveness, and one of the ones is that we generally think that there's something outside of us in the world that is leading to our lack of peace. And what Jesus is teaching us in the Course is that that's not true. That our lack of peace is always due to a choice within ourselves. So what he tells us that happens is we take our inner upset that really begins before anything happens in our life, and then we push it out onto a circumstance, onto a person, onto an interaction, onto another driver on the road, again, whatever it might be. But that's not really where the upset lies. So what we do is we recall the projection, we reverse the projection, we bring it back inside, and then we see that that's also not really where it is either. What do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is that there is no real cause for any upset, period, because all of our seeming upset stems from the idea that we could be separate from God. And as we learn over and over again, the separation from God never occurred. It was just an idle dream. a tiny mad idea with no effect. All of these thoughts really reinforce the idea that we've never left our oneness with God. We never have left heaven. And so we're just having a dream that all of these other scary things are happening. And now we're realizing we want to wake up from that dream. So these are some of the really big ideas in forgiveness. And I'm sure this workbook lesson is going to help us with these concepts too.
Exactly. And as we're going into this, the other major component in the course comes up for observation and contemplation, and that is the recognition that you cannot give to others what you have not received. So as we kind of veer off in that direction, the course over and over again makes us aware of the fact that there is no difference between giving and receiving. And as long as you are in that space of constantly forgiving the illusion that you are encountering, or whatever, or of whatever content it might contain, you are receiving that forgiveness in the same instant as a part of the same act. So in order to receive, you have to give. In order to be able to give, you have to receive. So that in itself is a way of leveling the surface, the ground, around the idea of duality, because we're drawn back to the recognition that in truth, duality is the core of the illusions that we are confronted with over and over again. And, it's a very easy journey, but we have so much resistance to the simplicity that is offered to us in A Course in Miracles.
Yeah, that's true. And it's why oftentimes when people talk about the Course, throughout the Course, actually, Jesus calls the ideas in it simple. He says this is a very simple Course. But he rarely says that the practice of this is easy. And that's why, a lot of us, as we start to get these concepts, they make a lot of sense, right? We're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. God is love. God is truth. God has never left me. God has never abandoned me. But then we often still struggle with really living these principles in our life. And that resistance that we're talking about is just our attachment to fear. And yeah, why don't I just kind of go right on with that next paragraph here. It says, the unforgiving mind is full of fear and offers love no room to be itself, no place where it can spread its wings in peace and soar above the turmoil of the world. The unforgiving mind is sad, without the hope of respite and release from pain. It suffers and abides in misery, peering about in darkness, seeing not, yet certain of the danger lurking there. So when he keeps on going in this vein for a little bit here, it's kind of a sad energy, right? When we look at what it is we feel when there's been unforgiveness within us. And he's really helping us to contrast our sort of ego way of thinking and ego way of looking at the world with the Holy Spirit's interpretation that he's always offering us over and over. And he's just saying, which one of these do you want? What do you want here? And helping us to realize that we have a choice, and encouraging us then, once we realize that, to make the choice for peace, because he knows that's going to make us happier. And really our happiness is the Holy Spirit's goal. So we just have to keep noticing the things that aren't what we want and saying, no, I don't think I want that again and again and again.
Exactly. And throughout the day, throughout the week, we often have those brief periods where we have this anger welling up for no apparent reason, and we're also looking around for something to attach it to. But the truth is, the anger is coming from that level of frustration where we have failed to be forgiving. And it creates a multitude of side effects, including the idea that we can be attacked because of something that we have done in the past, and that justifies our attacking others around us. So it turns into just, more and more turmoil and more intrigue, and it becomes very involved and very complex. And as soon as you're feeling that anger and that urge comes up to try and attach it to a person or a situation, that is a very important point to recognize, because that's when you need to take immediate action and really ask yourself, have I been building up this rage because I have failed to stop and forgive situations and individuals around me? So it really is something where you can test the weather just by your emotional content during the moment. And that's what I find very redemptive about the Course, is that it gives us very simple tools that we can use to nullify this mindset that creates all of this discomfort that we go throughout the day. It goes on to say, the unforgiving mind is torn with doubt, confused about itself and all it sees, afraid and angry, weak and blustering, afraid to go ahead, afraid to stay, afraid to awaken or to go to sleep, afraid of every sound, yet more afraid of stillness, terrified of darkness, yet more terrified at the approach of light. What can the unforgiving mind perceive but its damnation? What can it behold except the proof that all its sins are real? And that really is, something that is so lucid when you read a paragraph like this, and you can look at your life and tick off the number of incidents on your fingers in the last couple of hours or the last day or day and a half where this has been true. And so it is important for us to really be mindful and to be willing to discipline ourselves. And that's really what it boils down to, is, are you going to side with the ego and go undisciplined by your own nature, or are you going to restore to your consciousness that truth and side on the side of the Holy Spirit?
Yeah. And again, it always comes back to these two things, right? We only really have two things we can choose between. No matter how complicated the world looks, no matter how topsy-turvy things might be, in the end, it always comes back to, what is it that we want? Do we want the peace and joy of love, or do we want to kind of be in separation? Do we want to feel isolated and afraid, as this paragraph is saying? And we wouldn't consciously think, oh yeah, I want to feel miserable. But some part of us does have that thought. Some part of us does have that belief. And what we start to get as we do this work is the purpose behind that. Like, why would we want to feel miserable? Why would we want to feel kind of low energy? Why would we want to feel upset by the things that are happening in the world? Well, the reason is because it really strengthens our idea of our little self, what the Course calls the ego, right? This is the part of us that's attached to the I, attached to the individuality as our identity. And over again, we're starting to see that that's really the root of all of our pain, all of our suffering. And we're starting to get better at saying, maybe I can let this go. Maybe I don't need to hold on to this. Maybe I can come into some different opportunity for connecting, rather than this sort of false connection. Maybe I can find that holy instant which leads me into the state of peace. So that becomes our work then. And I'm going to jump down a little bit. to another paragraph here in this workbook lesson. It says, forgiveness is acquired. It is not inherent in the mind, which cannot sin. So here at the beginning, he's saying, on the level of our truth, there is no sin, right? On the level of truth, there's never been a mistake. We are still in perfect oneness. So he continues, as sin is an idea you taught yourself, forgiveness must be learned by you as well, but from a teacher other than yourself, who represents the other self in you. Through him you learn how to forgive the self you think you made and let it disappear. Thus you return your mind as one to him who is yourself and who can never sin. So this work is about coming to see that the me that I have always thought that I am is actually what he says here, the self you think you made. Right? This is the self I think I made, the self I think I am. But I'm starting to see it's not really what I am, and it never really has been. And again, a part of us really hates this idea, right? It was very unnerving to look at this. But as we do the work, as we keep practicing and sort of releasing this identity more and more, we find it really leads us to a sense of freedom, a sense of spaciousness and happiness. And there's a real gratefulness and graciousness that comes in stepping into this experience more and more.
Yeah, that is very true. And it's also interesting how the ego mind is very, very selective about a certain group that it's going to attack over and over again. And we're really witnessing that in this current cycle of politics in America and religion in America. And, the left and the right, the good guys and the bad guys and all of that. And so we have multiple opportunities, but how often are we willing to come out of our own camp and look at it from the other side of the river here? And that's really what we have to start being able to do, is to not only forgive those guys over there, but to start to look at our own circumstances and begin to forgive, the atrocities that are being committed by the people in our own group. And no matter how much you may want to believe that you're part of the right side of the faction here, the truth is both sides are equally wrong. And that's a bitter pill to swallow for a lot of people. That takes, a lot of serious observation and a willingness to disassociate ourselves from our prejudices and our fears. So no matter where you're at on the river, upstream or downstream or in the middle of the river or on the curves and sides of the river, all of this illusionary world is just that. It is an illusion. And so none of it is going to be preserved. You're not going to be able to, by the act of forgiveness, preserve those things that you are still holding dear that are a part of duality. It is an absolute surrender across the board. And that's a subtle point that a lot of people fail to recognize in their own process and their own journey to awakening. And that's what makes the journey that much longer. So we go down these side trails and we keep trying to hold on to this belief that there is good and bad. And in truth, there are neither qualities exist. In truth, there is only the perfection of God. And when you begin to really look at that, it's like, wow, it never occurred to me that God isn't on one side or the other. But the truth is, God resides in its own perfection in a state of eternal bliss. And that's what we're trying to return to.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, it's easy to sort of divide ourselves up and to, be in one camp versus another. if we look at the history of the world, this has happened over and over and over and over again. And even within our current situation, there's so many different factions, right? We have different political camps. We have different businesses that are competing against one another. We've got sometimes issues between families or between people within families. All these different pieces that feel like opposition, that feel like conflict, that feel like challenge. And what do we have to do? We have to move beyond what is happening on the level of form. Now, we should always be appropriate, if we need to do something, if it's appropriate for us to take some action in order to be of help in the situation, we can do that. But on another level, what we do is we make this shift within the mind, and we come to see that what is actually the same about me and that other person, what's the same about us, is actually much more important than what's different. And what's different may be any number of things, but what's the same is always this. It's that everyone in any situation has an ability to choose love, and they have the option to choose fear, and they have that part of their mind that is the decision maker between those two options. And no matter what anyone's going through, that's always true. When we can see that sameness in everyone, when we can see that everyone has the capacity for compassion, even if they're not actively choosing that route, it reminds us of all the times maybe that we haven't chosen the compassionate route. And we see that even if what's playing out is different than what played out in our life, on some level, we know the dynamic. And that helps us to realize that we can find compassion within ourselves for them. We can find kindness within ourselves for them. And that really just opens whole new doors and whole new vistas within ourselves to know that we're all wanting happiness in the end. And when we can see those commonalities, it gives us a very different perspective to look at the world with.
That is absolutely true. And when we skip down to paragraph 9 here, it says, the unforgiving mind does not believe that giving and receiving are the same. Yet we will try to learn today that they are one through practicing forgiveness toward one whom you think of as an enemy and one whom you consider as a friend. And as you learn to see them both as one, we will extend the lesson to yourself. And that is the most important part of this whole process, because that's ground zero for the work we're doing. It always comes back to the self. And once we begin to realize that that self is inclusive of 7.5 billion people on the planet, plus the animals, plus the plants, plus the rocks, plus the cosmic stardust, however you want to look at it, all of that whole collective process, once you remove the illusion of materiality from it and see it as pure spirit, you begin to float to the surface and recognize, oh, this is all about me. This has always been all about me. It may be appearing to be about the neighbor or about my best friend or about, the puppy dog in the corner or whatever. But the truth is, it all reduces to you. And that's what the Course is trying to bring you to understand, that you're not fixing the world around you, you're fixing yourself as you continue to delve deeper into the Course principles. And that paragraph finishes off, and see that their escape included yours. And that's what's really beautiful, is the back door. We can all get out of this madness. And all we have to do is fix ourselves, forgive ourselves, because that's where the whole germination point is in everything that's going on in the illusion that you are surrounded by.
Yeah, and again, that brings us back to this idea that these concepts are quite simple, and they're simple in the fact that they always come back to the same place, right? We always come back to the idea that on a deep level, what we really want is love and not fear. What we really want is joy and not pain. And all of the thoughts that have led us to experiences of pain and fear are things that we can change. Again, it doesn't mean the outer circumstance will always change, but it does mean that our experience of the outer circumstance will be different. Because why? Because we won't have that anger within. We won't have that pain within. We won't have that suffering within. And we can let all these things, these parts of ourselves come up. But what happens is we just buy into them less and less and less. And it ultimately really starts to change our experience of the world and leads us to a much happier and peaceful state of being.
That is absolutely true. And as we proceed now toward the weekend, we can really ruminate on these thoughts throughout the day and recognize that, you know, we have reaffirmed our understanding of this, and that should make it easier to put it in practice. So it looks like it's time to maybe wind this video up, but it was very validating and very reassuring, and I thank you, Barret, for sharing these experiences with me through the videos that we've done over the past, because it makes it easier for me to practice what we're preaching here simply by looking at it and validating that it does work and that it is based on truth.
Yeah, this has been a really beautiful joining, and it continues to be. I've also received just a lot of help from these talks, and even as we're ostensibly speaking to a wider audience, it always comes back to us, right? As we're teaching, there's no one else out there. So whoever is hearing this, realize that this is always about you, right? Because there is only one mind, there is only one self. And this appearance of many is actually an elaborate deception that we're collectively pulling on ourselves. But we're starting to catch on to it, and I think these are nice concepts for us to wind down on today. So
absolutely,
yeah.
Well, you've got a couple of things coming up, but the big event is happening in Colorado. So
yeah, I am going to be leading a healing retreat called Clearing the Way for Spirit, August 23rd through 26th. It's at Peaceful Meadow Retreat Center in Boulder, Colorado. And it's going to be talking about these concepts, diving deeper, exploring how we can step into our truth, how we can let go of these old patterns and find the reality that is underlying them. So yeah, we're going to be exploring and having fun and hanging out around some campfires and all that good stuff. So if that speaks to you, reach out to me. It'd be great to have you there. And yeah, always more good things to come. So you can check out my website to find out the details. It's barretthedeen.com. And yeah, I'm looking forward to even more of these talks too with you, Chris. They're always such fun.
yes, they definitely give us that really needed anchorage in the swirling mad world that we are surrounded by. You know, I grew up in Colorado, and I'm very familiar with that region. And right down the road from Boulder is Golden, Colorado, the home of Adolf Coors. So you can get some really great beer from the source while you're there for your healing workshop.
All right. Well, maybe that will be the yeast that helps everything to rise up for healing.
Yeah, and then you can hop back home and just have a glorious, glorious rest of your life.
That was good. Very good.
Well, I will chat with you next week, and hopefully we'll have some more exciting things to share.
All right, sounds good. We'll brew something up.
Frothy foam on the top of it, just, you know, for that added gusto.
All right, sounds good, man. We'll have a great weekend.
You too. Take care.
Right, you too.